Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this webinar. From our side, first and foremost, thank you very much. Great honor and a great privilege. Thank you for the invitation by SAPCO. Thank you for Kathy for initiating all of this, and Lauren and her team putting all of this together. And thank you for those of you registered and that have already joined. Really looking forward to tonight. And from our side, once again, thank you very much for the invitation. Just before we get started with the official part of the webinar, please just make sure that you haven't got any other browsers open to steal some of your bandwidth, that all the audio settings are in place. If you do want to chat with us during the course of the evening, you're more than welcome. Just type away in the chat box. The chats that you send, it's confidential. It goes to the administrator. We don't see it as we talk you through the webinar. And then if you have any questions at that time, just type away. We will keep the questions aside and address it at the end of the evening. The webinar typically runs for about 40-45 minutes, and then we leave the last bit of the hour for some Q&A. Of course, if there's more of an in-depth discussion, you're always welcome. We typically run over with another 30 minutes for those of you who want to stay online and ask us some more questions. So that we typically do afterwards. We don't have any handouts tonight, so that's not applicable. Our company is known as Platform for Connected Leadership. We're a small company, recently established, and we focus on leadership skills for individuals, for teams, organizations. We also operate on a larger scale with societal leaders, and then also with institutions that's involved in leading specific organizations on a world or on a global scale. As far as the Platform for Connected Leadership is concerned, tonight we have our chairman, Dr. Waddah, that will be leading this webinar, talking about discovering Ramadan. Now, a little bit of a background on where this topic comes from and why we specifically talking about this. We run a webinar series, and on the second one, we spoke about social inequalities. And, yes, they're prevalent and it's always been with us, but a lot of these social inequalities became more evident during the so-called lockdown that's happened across the world. And we could very clearly, through social media and also mainstream media, see the difference between the haves and the have-nots, people that have advantages, people like ourselves, that we can stay connected through technology and even enhance our skills, acquire new skills, and then even study further if we wanted to. Whilst there's a large part of the global population that does not share in this privilege, lockdown for them is one of hardship. A lot of people in smaller spaces. And we spoke about this, but what Dr. Waddah, who is also the chairperson of our organization, what he did is he gave us this whole social inequality. He gave us a perspective through a Ramadan lens onto social inequality. And this webinar that we did received a lot of attention, and henceforth we were contacted by SAPCO to do one specifically for the SAPCO members, talking about Ramadan in this time, what's the meaning of it, the deeper meaning of it, and then obviously also entertain you with some very interesting practices, thoughts, disciplines, and understanding of doing business, not just during Ramadan, but in the region in general and across cultures. So the webinar itself, to help you follow the flow, we structure it. There's 8 main components. I'll be doing a very brief, more official introduction just now, and then I'm going to hand over to Dr. Waddah that will talk about the webinar aims, the objectives, look at a basic overview and introduction to Islam, fasting of Ramadan, and the zakat practices, which is very important and central, pivotal to the Ramadan practice. The differences between religious and cultural practices, which is also very important. People sometimes tend to get them a little bit confused, or they cross lines insofar as that's concerned. The drive towards creating socioeconomic justice. Ramadan and the UAE, specifically looking at business practices, very interesting. And then we'll end off with a Q&A session. As far as the introduction, I always enjoy introducing not just the company, but more specifically Dr. Waddah, because we actually have our own interesting history. It was by chance that I met Dr. Waddah about 2 years ago. We were introduced to one another via a mutual friend. We were about 6 people that evening at the table, and I was really intrigued and interested in what Dr. Waddah had to share about leadership specifically. Contacted him afterwards, and then for about 18 months, we would share a lot of time, first Sunday of every month typically, at Waddah Gourmet, those of you who maybe know it, and we'll sit and we'll smoke shisha and drink green tea and coffee and whatever, and just talk, just exchange ideas, share different ideas with one another, and in the process became very, very good friends. Our goal really is to make a contribution to leadership. I'll never forget one of the evenings after we spent some time at Waddah Gourmet, Dr. Waddah just turned around and said, look, we've now done this, we've developed this framework, and we have something that we can work with, but let's go out there and just make better leaders. So when we look at us as an organization, we kind of purpose before profit. This friendship of ours really laid the foundations of making positive change and helping leaders to be better prepared for the future. Of course, this gave birth to a very specific set of values that we have in the organization, huge respect for one another, obviously a lot of trust, because we had to be very transparent. The two of us come from different parts of the world, different religious and traditional backgrounds, really respecting one another's integrity, embracing those differences and learning from one another, very transformational by nature. And we have this value of connectedness, connecting with other cultures for the sake of learning from them, and trying in that sense also to develop cross-culturally better leaders for the future. Our programs and initiatives are very learner-centric. It's all about you, the individual, and how we can help you develop and be better leaders for the future. That's the official introduction. Dr. Waddah, I'm going to hand it over to you. Thank you very much and welcome.
Thank you very much, Steyn. Assalamu alaikum, shalom, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us tonight. I think Steyn did a good introduction and to our company, and I do want to also thank the South African Business Council for inviting us tonight to just talk a little bit about Ramadan and about doing business in Dubai during Ramadan. We start off with a few maybe aims and objectives, but before we do that, I'd like to just ask a few questions of the audience here, just so we can get a gauge of the people that are with us tonight. How long have you been in the UAE? So the first question is, how long have you been in the UAE? And my colleague is just going to put a poll up in a minute. Is it 1 to 4 years? Is it 5 to 10 years? Is it more than 10 years? So I'll give it a couple more seconds. So very interesting. So we've got 88% of you online today have been here in the UAE for less than 4 years, one between 5 to 10 years, and 11% 10 years, who's been here for 10 years or more. Right. So just to ask you a question, just honestly, just a yes, no answer really. Do you know why Muslims fast for a whole month? So this is the next question. Right. So great. So most of you said yes. So hopefully, when I just give a quick explanation in a minute, it will be the same as you thought. And the last question is, how many Muslims do you think there are in the world today? So is it less than 1 billion? Is it about 1.5 billion? Or is it 1.8 billion? Right, so quite close. Actually, the last reading of total number of Muslims, I think we're just north of 1.8 billion Muslims in the world. This is all different sects of Islam. So most of you were very close, either 1.5 or 1.8. So 75% thought 1.5, and 25% 1.8. And it is known to be probably the fastest growing religion in the world. Right. So the aims and objectives today. So I thought that we would just give you a quick introduction to Islam, and then explain just a bit about Ramadan, and explain also fasting and zakat, because these are two pillars in Islam, and why these two pillars are important. And then start talking a little bit about the differences in cultures in the Muslim world, and then talk about Ramadan, UAE, and business practice. And I want to maybe just spend a few minutes also talking about the impact of COVID-19 on us as nationals here in the UAE, and as Arabs and Muslims in the Muslim world at the moment, or all around the world actually, in terms of what we generally do. So I just to give you a bit of background on myself, so obviously I'm the chairman of PCL, but I have a day job. I'm actually the senior director for sustainability, operation, and business excellence for the Emirates National Company. Also, I'm also an author of several books. One of the books that I have authored with my father, who alhamdulillah is still alive and doing well, is a book on the Al-Fatiha. Al-Fatiha is the first 7 verses of the Holy Quran. We had read many of the translation of the meanings of the Quran, especially of Al-Fatiha, the first 7 verses, which is like the equivalent of the Lord's Prayer to the Christian, and we were not happy really with the translations that were given in English. So we decided to, if you're not happy with any of the translations, decide to go and do a new translation. That project, which was supposed to take about 6 months, ended up taking nearly 10 years. But we ended up with a very, very good book, which explained actually a lot of the meanings behind these 7 verses, which are extremely important, because they're the 7 verses that we use in every single prayer that we undertake. So let me start with a basic overview on and an introduction to Islam. But before we do that, another quiz question, just to keep you guys with us. So Muslims follow a lunar calendar, right? So we follow a calendar. That's why we always look at the sighting of the moon to understand when, or to know when Ramadan starts and when Eid starts, or when the end of Ramadan starts, right? So the calendar starts here. The question is it because of the birth of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, or is it because of the ascension of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, or is it the migration of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him? So very interesting. So nearly an equal split. 25% say the birth, 38% say the sensation, and 38% say the migration of the Prophet. So actually the calendar, the Islamic calendar, is called the Hijri calendar. Hijra in Arabic means actually the migration. So it is actually signifies, the calendar starts from the time that the Prophet actually migrated from Mecca and went to a place called Yathrib. Yathrib became Medina, or now called the Medina al-Munawwara, where the Prophet is buried near his mosque. So it's actually the migration of the Prophet. So that's why it's called the Hijri calendar. Right. So, sorry. So let me talk to you about quickly what is Islam as a religion. We believe it's the final message to humanity. So we believe that there were many messages and many different messages that God had sent to humankind, and this was the final message to humanity. It is also an Abrahamic religion. Abrahamic religions are basically Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Obviously, Judaism came first, and then followed by Christianity, and then we believe it was followed by Islam. So the Holy Quran was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Now, it was actually revealed over a period of 23 years. So 23 years. It started when he was 40 years old, when the Quran was originally revealed to him, and it continued for 23 years. So the last verse came down 23 years later. Then the ordering of the verses was ordained, and the Prophet was told, you put this verse before this verse before this verse, and then it was memorized mostly. But in the latter, during the life of the Prophet, it was actually written. So there were versions of it that were written. The Quran is quite unique because there's only one single version of the Quran. It is only in Arabic. There are many different translation of meanings, but these are not the Quran. So you cannot actually, as a Muslim, regardless of if you're an Arab speaker or not, you cannot sit and recite it in any other language. You recite it only in Arabic, and that's why you find many people around the world from different parts of the world who have memorized the Quran in Arabic. Islam is a very simple religion, actually. It's just to believe that there is only one and only one Supreme Lord. Yeah? We call him Allah. So the word Allah in Arabic cannot be, if you look at phonetically, yeah, it cannot be pluralized. It's an unpluralizable word. So when you say the word God, the direct translation in Arabic would be ilah. Ilah, or like in Hebrew or Semitic, they say Olehem. Yeah, Olehem means aliha. Aliha means gods, and ilah means one God. Allah means the one and only God. So that's why you find that Muslims always refer to the Almighty as Allah, because it's an unpluralizable word, and because the monotheism is a very, very central theme in Islam, and therefore that's why we call him Allah, because he cannot be pluralized. There is only one God. Obviously, also to believe that Muhammad was the final messenger of Allah, and in that sense, because there were other messages and other messengers who had come before him, we must also believe and respect all the previous messengers and prophets, like Prophet Ibrahim, peace be upon him, Ishmael, Isaac, Joseph, Moses, and we believe that Jesus also was a very special prophet who was sent also by God. So what is Islam as a faith? Just very simply, there are 6 pillars of faith. One of them is to believe that there is only one and only one God, yeah, Allah. You need to believe in that He has His angels. You need to believe in all the messages that He sent, so all God's messages that He sent. So we must believe, to be a true Muslim, you must believe in the Torah, you must believe in the Bible, the Holy Bible, and the other messages that God had sent. You must believe in all the prophets and the messages that were sent, and you must believe in the day of reckoning, or the day of recompense, sometimes called the day of judgment. So we call it the day of reckoning because that's the day when God makes all right, effectively, and recompensates everyone, and also to believe in faith, to believe that God has ordained and believe in the faith, be it good or what you see as bad. So Islam and its pillars. So those were the pillars of faith. The pillars of Islam are and these are the 5 things that you need to do as a Muslim. One of them is to actually say the Shahadatain, which is to bear witness in that there is only one and only one God, and that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is his messenger. To actually pray, we pray 5 times a day. It does change. We have, if we're traveling, we can pray in 3 periods of the day, and we shorten the prayers. Anyway, but generally we pray 5 times a day at the morning break, which is called the Fajr prayer, at noon, which is basically the Dhuhr prayer. The Asr prayer is the late afternoon prayer, and then in the evening, as the sun starts setting, we have the Maghrib prayer. That's the time when we break our fast. And by the way, Fajr prayer is when we stop eating, or start the fast, more correctly. And Maghrib is when we break our fast. And then there's the Isha prayer, which is usually about an hour and a half. Actually, when we started this webinar, it was about the time for Isha, and that is the final prayer of the day. There are other supplementary prayers also, which you can do, but we're not going to get into that. But these are extra prayers that Muslims also undertake, especially during Ramadan. I'll get to that later on because it's important for you to know when you're doing sort of business, especially during Ramadan. So to give zakat is like basically giving alms to the needy. Sometimes people call it, I don't like the word, religious tax, because tax is taxed upon you. When I come to explain zakat, which is quite important because it's very much related also to our income and business. And to fast the holy month of Ramadan, the 29 or the 30 days from start to finish. Of course, people who are sick at the time, they're exempt. There are some various different exemptions. Some of them are permanent exemptions for those who really cannot fast. But if during the month, there are some other exemptions also, which we won't get into because that is more detailed. But generally, everybody who can who's able to fasts. Kids generally start fasting from the age of say 10 years old or something like that. I mean, my kids started fasting a couple of years ago. They're 12 today. They always want to fast earlier, but we got them sometimes to break the fast because it's a bit too much, especially if it's long hours. But they don't need to fast until they're older. And then also to perform the Hajj, the pilgrimage. And if you see the picture in the background of this slide, this is the Kaaba. A lot of people don't know the Kaaba was actually not built by the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The Kaaba was around actually before the birth of Prophet Muhammad. It is Mecca, or what was called Becca many years ago, was there for a long time. We believe that it was Prophet Abraham, peace be upon him, who went to the Vale of Becca with Hajar, which was his second wife. Not Sarah. Sarah was his first wife, peace be upon her. And Hajar went with him to Wadi Becca, and he left them there. He left her, and he left Ishmael. Ishmael is the first son that Abraham had, but not from Sarah. And then later on, he had Isaac from Sarah when actually both of them were quite an advanced age. Anyway, so we don't need to perform Hajj unless we're able to do so, because it's quite a trek. It's so if you can just imagine, you can do the maths. Very simple. You've got today about 1.8 billion Muslims in the world, and you have a place which has a capacity of about 3.5 maximum. I don't even think it reaches even 4 million in terms of a capacity for people to actually go and perform the Hajj. So it's actually impossible for all the Muslims to do Hajj. So people who are able to do that, so that's one of the pillars of Islam. There's a difference between Hajj and Umrah. Umrah is you can do it at any time of the year. It's like a minor pilgrimage. It is not necessary, but people do it because it's a very enjoyable kind of experience to undertake. Right. So now we're going to talk a little bit about fasting in Ramadan and the zakat practices. So again, so we believe that Ramadan really is a very important time to learn, reflect, and sort of share, and sort of share. It's really a time where we fast the whole lunar month. So we start fast at the Fajr time, so before the sun comes up. Nowadays it's around about 4:15 in the morning, and then we break our fast as the sun starts setting, which is nowadays it's around about 7 o'clock in the evening. In certain parts of the world, obviously the hours are longer and shorter. Fasting is a very interesting type of worship, because actually it's very much one which is very closely moderated, if you like, the relationship with the Creator. Because when you fast, it's you could break your fast and nobody could know that you broke your fast. Only God can see you. So it really does require a great deal of patience and discipline. And I think it teaches us a lot of patience and discipline. I mean, for those of you who are aware, today some dietitians or some doctors also recommend intermittent fasting for improving health, or dieting and stuff like that. So it's also very good. It's a very good time for the body, to take a break, usually in the year. So there's probably some benefits also, not only spiritually but physically and mentally. I find it personally and a very fantastic time for self-reflection. We spend a lot of time, thinking about, when you're really hungry or really thirsty, you sit there and you think about. And Steyn said at the beginning of that when we spoke last time in our last webinar, we spoke about the social inequalities that were understood. I mean, today we see, I'm watching the news the last few days, and you see a lot of countries in the world are starting to open up from a lockdown, and people are starting to come back into the economy, because I think, on measure, when you look at, you're locking down and you're closing down sort of the economy, try to stop the spread of this horrendous COVID-19. But at the same time, economically, there are a lot of people around the world who live really hand to mouth, and we must understand that, if they don't earn that day, they don't eat that day. And we must really thank God, day and night, that we have the privilege of having a meal. Most of us eat about 3 times a day. These people, some of them, they're lucky to have 1 meal a day. So we must thank God for that. And I think that fasting also teaches us that, because it's the most important thing to have sustenance to yourself and your family and stuff like that. But importantly, it is a continuity of the previous commandments. So in the Quran it says, "Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kutiba alaykum as-siyam kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun." So, O you who have believed, decreed upon you is fasting, as it was decreed upon those before you, that you may become righteous. So this is from Surah Al-Baqarah, the largest chapter in the Quran, and so that even the Christians practice a type of fasting during Lent, and there are many others who also practice. So I don't think there is any other, actually. All other, I think, types of religions and faiths and stuff like that, they all practice some kind of fasting. So fasting is something which is practiced not only by the Muslims. Maybe we're really we're very disciplined with it in terms of it is, as I said, one of the commandments. So what is zakat? So this is I thought it would be interesting just to give you a bit of insight into this, and to understand why Muslims during this time, you'd have seen maybe on TV, there's a lot of ads about giving zakat at this time, or giving alms, or giving charity at this time. So zakat is a religious obligation. So as I explained, it's one of the pillars, right? So it's about giving away money to the poor, which is said to purify the yearly earnings that over and above what is required to provide the essential needs of a person or the family. So basically, it is the money that you have stored with you effectively for more than 12 months. It is totally self-regulated. So I regulate myself. I look at, what is my wealth? What is my accumulated wealth? How much wealth have I accumulated in the past 12 months? And then I take and make a payment of 2.5% at the minimum of any wealth that I've accumulated for the past 12 lunar months. So what most people do is they pay zakat during Ramadan, or around that period, because it's a sort of a time when it comes as an occasion. But one of the reasons that they do also is that they're hoping that God will reward them even more, because it's just such a blessed time, and it is a time of social social equality. When you're fasting and you're hungry, and the person who is also having to fast, sometimes not out of will, but they're fasting because they don't have any food or nothing to eat or drink. So it brings about that equality. So it reminds us of that. So many people understand and feel like this is a time for giving. And so they give that 2.5%. This is on cash, gold, silver, and trading instruments. But we also, and I'm not getting into this because I think it's not really the scope of this seminar. But really, you can also so those who are keeping, for example, livestock and cattle, or who are producing, who are farmers, there is a different percentage which is paid out on their produce, on their annual produce. But we're not going to get into that. But it's 2.5% for cash, gold, silver, and other trading instruments. So what it does actually, it ensures that there's a minimum circulation of wealth back into the economy as well. So if you were storing gold, for example, and the people who hoard whatever gold and silver, they would allowed to keep their gold and keep this in savings. But every year you'd have to actually pay 2.5% down on the gold that you're storing, or the cash that you're storing. This means that you'd have to as a minimum, bare minimum, push that back into the economy. So it just helps make sure that the economy and usually the bottom part of the economy, where people who really are in most of need of it, and I'm going to come on to that in a minute, get this money. So it really, in our view, ensures a minimum socioeconomic justice is sort of achieved by this money going back and circulating the economy. Of course, you don't need to stick to 2.5%. Usually, most people, especially during Ramadan, they give a lot more than 2.5%. But 2.5% is the regulated amount. So this is interesting as well. So whom gets the zakah? So who is allowed to get the zakah? So there's about 8 types of people who get the zakah. So these are the poor, the indigent, those who work on it, they're administering it, and those whose hearts have been reconciled. It is paid to free those who are in bondage, who are in slavery, those who are debt-ridden, and in good cause of God, and for the wayfarer. So these are the 8 types of people that can get this. And interestingly, I've looked at this, and I've spoken to in people who work in sort of charities and stuff like that, and I found it was very, very interesting that God ordained it. And so this is a verse. This is taken from direct verse from the Quran, right? And you'll find, if you are interested and you read, in fact, the translated version of the meanings of the Quran in English, or maybe in Afrikaans or something, you will find that the Quran is maybe slightly different from the Holy Bible, in that it is more based on it's like a book of code. So it really very much gives an explanation to the code of how to live, how to eat, how to get married, how to get divorced, how to spread inheritance, who to give money to, and so on and so forth. This verse is just an example of that. But it's very important that it actually assigned money that needs to go to those who are also administering it, because so it's a complete system, so it can remain a sustainable system, that from the monies which are being set aside to be given, so it's so it becomes a sustainable system. I hope that clarifies. And the recipient of zakah cannot belong to an immediate family. So in that sense, I cannot give zakah to my father. Yeah. Well, not also to my mother, but my mother has passed away. May she rest in peace. But I cannot give any zakah to my father. I cannot give zakah to my wife. I can't give zakah to my children. I can't give zakah to my grandparents, for example. Yeah. Because these are direct family members who actually I am obligated to spending money on. So I cannot use the zakah for that. The money, the zakah. So even if my father was poor, I cannot give him money from my zakah money. I would have to give him money which is separate to what is prescribed in the 2.5%. And in Ramadan, it's very interesting. There is a special kind of small zakah which is also paid. It's called like zakat al-fitr. It is an extra zakah which is paid just before the Eid prayers, or a few days before the Eid prayers. And that zakah is really to give the poor at least some money, so that they can celebrate. At least they can celebrate Eid. So I just wanted to explain zakah because it's very, very important in terms of the whole social justice piece. Right. So we've gone through now the basics of Islam. I hope I was able to give that a little bit of justice, gives you a bit of context, really to what we're going to be discussing next. So, of course, Islam is a very big subject. There's many sects, there's many this, many that, but I mean, these what I told you, what I've explained to you right now, I don't think that any different type of sect in Islam would differ on. We are completely all in agreement with the things that I've just explained. So nothing that could be potentially controversial. Okay, so what are the differences? And now I'm going to talk a little bit about the differences of the religious and cultural practices. In my time, I mean, I've well, not nowadays because of COVID-19, but I traveled around the world a lot. You know, I've spoken at so many conferences and traveled so many different places in the world. You know, from the Far East, from the States right to the Far East to Japan to Korea. You know, South Korea. Singapore, Malaysia, obviously India, the different places in the Arab world, in Europe and in the States, etc. The only place I haven't been to is, well, other than two places, probably Australia and Latin America. And I met a lot of people, and a lot of people ask me some questions when they get to know me. They ask me questions, and they say, well, can we ask you this question, because it's, they feel that, okay, maybe it's a bit embarrassing to ask this question. But I tell them, no, you can ask whatever question, and you should ask any question. And in fact, even at the Q&A session, please, you're welcome to ask any question. I mean, if I can answer it, I'll answer it. If I can't, then I'll say I cannot answer it. But there are differences between some religious practices and cultural practices. So people from different other religions, they travel around, maybe the Arab world or the Muslim world, and they see people behaving and doing things in a different way, and then they wonder what is this all about? Why their religious practice is different? Because, well, actually, probably they're not religious practices; they're more cultural practices. So, two questions for you here. The first question: do you think that wearing a black abaya and a headscarf is a religious obligation for Muslim women? So, this is our poll. Right. It's a bit of a tricky question, huh? Because not everybody's wanted to answer it. Okay, I'll come to that answer in a minute. Okay, do you believe that the face veil or the niqab is required only by certain sects in Islam? Okay, thank you very much for that. So 78% said yes, and 22% said no to the niqab. And we have yes to wearing the black abaya, 44%, and no, 56%. Okay, so let me show you this before I answer this question. This is two pictures that you see on the top and the bottom, and you can see how these women are dressed, fully covered. The picture at the top actually are some Orthodox Christians. I think they're maybe Coptic Christians. So they're wearing the black sort of abaya. These are I don't believe that they're nuns. This is not nuns. These are women just dressed in that traditional way. And at the bottom, these are, I think, Jews from the Yemen, dressed in that way. In fact, I was trying to find some photographs. I couldn't find them in my archives of some Jewesses in Bahrain, and the way that they used to dress in the 1930s and 1940s. There are many very old and indigenous Jewish families in Bahrain. Actually, some of them also are represented in the parliament of Bahrain, and some of them more orthodox would dress actually in the chowder, what is called the shedar or shawder, and the Iranian women sometimes they wear it as well. So in this part of the world, so the abaya actually, if you look back at this part of the world, generally they wouldn't actually wear the black abaya. The black abaya became a fashion. It's just a very convenient kind of thing. It's like a black overcoat. If you go to the Levant, for example, the women generally, and over here, you'll find that they wear a hijab, which is more like a scarf, a headscarf, which is tied usually with a safety pin. And they wear like an overcoat, what we call a balto, which is like an overcoat. So the abaya is just convenient for women to just sort of cover up when they go out. And the shayla actually is not a hijab. A shayla is more like a light kind of coat. So back to the question of should they? This is quite a tricky question. Do you think that wearing a black abaya and a headscarf is a religious obligation for Muslim women? So those of you who know about making survey questions, this is what we call a double-barreled question. It's actually nobody got it wrong and nobody got it right because it was a double-barreled question. Wearing the black abaya is not. Wearing a headscarf, as in covering the hair, is to most Muslims that women should sort of cover most of their hair. But the black abaya is not necessarily the case, because as long as the woman is dressed and is covered and decent, then no need for it to be necessarily kind of black. So it's just a bit of a tricky question, just to get us thinking, so I can sort of talk a bit about the subject. Okay, so the face veil or the niqab is not required only by certain sects. I mean, there may be certain, and the word sect here is a bit tricky, because there are certain sects and there's certain kind of schools of thought, and these are different. So there's the Sunni Islam, Shia Islam, there's the Abadis, and like our brothers in Oman. The Shia are also spread around the world. The Sunnis probably make up around about what is estimated to be 80 to 85% of Muslims around the world, or the other sects cover a smaller percentage. This is a long story which we won't get into, but generally it's not. The niqab is only worn by certain people. They choose to wear the niqab. The only time that a veil should be probably worn is that if a woman is sort of like going to a wedding or something like that, and she's got a lot of makeup on and stuff like that, then she might look so to go out, generally you should sort of veil herself so that she doesn't sort of attract undue propositions, etc. So dress codes were very, very similar, as you can see here in the Arab world. So what we see as dress code sometimes can be considered that, oh well, is it local dress? I mean, we wear this. I mean, I'm wearing a kandora tonight. I mean, this is not the Emirati kandora. The Emirati kandora is the one which doesn't have a collar and has a little kind of like a tie to it. We generally use that to sort of put some nice perfume and stuff like that on. Some of them have got cufflinks. Some of them are just open. But generally, they're white. They're light colored. They're a mixture of cotton and some polyester. The reason why they're not 100% cotton is because it's very, very difficult to sort of iron them if they're cotton. And availability of materials and tailors really in the area and in this region really sort of made people dress in similar ways. So you'd have found that many years ago there was no such thing as a sort of a religious dress. There's certain sects in Islam, like for example the Shia, like to wear a turban. A black turban defines a scholar who is a Hashmite. A white turban means that he's just a scholar, but he's not necessarily from the Quraysh family. And then they wear a sort of an overcoat and stuff like that. But generally, with Sunni Islam, we don't have a particular dress, and the reason for that is because actually we don't have effectively priesthood as such. So we don't have priesthood, as practiced in some of the Christian sects in terms of celibacy and things like that. We are they're all just really scholars. So more conservative dress codes were observed for a very long time, and we see that still in this part of the world. The UAE and the Arab world maintain to some extent some of those traditions, although you can see today that abayas are becoming breaking from the norm. They're breaking from being black and going into different colors and getting stitching and things like that. So anyway, so just to understand that there is a difference between the tradition and religious practices. So differences in some of the cultural practices and Islamic practices and rites should be sort of understood, and the only way to really understand is as Christ, peace be upon him, said, that seek and you shall find, right? So you ask and you shall be hopefully told, or it should be explained to you. Influenced by local traditions, as I said, you find that there's certain traditions which were there in that particular part of the world, which became that, but they became infused effectively in the religious practices, and therefore it became so you can't really tell, okay, what is a religious thing, or what is an actual local tradition. So I'll give you an example. I mean, I'm wearing this on my head at the moment, but actually this is probably an informal, a less formal way of dressing. For a national, what we dress is with the white ghatra, and then we wear this, which is a aqal, right? So let me show you a closer look at the aqal. So look at this. It's one piece actually, and then it's tied into two loops. And this is called the aqal, and the word aqala means to sort of to make firm, and aqal actually comes from the word aqala, to actually basically tie it. So this was basically a special piece of rope that the Arabs would use to when they wanted a camel to sit down in a particular area, they would use this to tie the hind legs to hold it down. So it was called the aqal. So when the camel was obviously traveling or moving or whatever, or on top of it, they had to put this rope somewhere. So what they did is they just used it to hold whatever they had on their head, and they had whatever this ghatra on because it would protect them from the sun. And they would use it sometimes if there is a sandstorm, also to be able to cover their face. So it was just out of practicality and the aqal. So it became later on. Obviously, I mean, I don't personally have a camel, that I walk around with, but I still wear the aqal because it's become like sort of a fashion, a fashionable thing to wear. And you'll find, if you look at different photographs of aqals in different parts of the world, you find that the Saudis had a very different type of aqal for, especially for the kings and for the nobles. Anyway, and the leading tribesmen. So different communities obviously have different levels of conservatism, as we said, and we've had a lot of mixed communities as well. So for those of you who've lived in other places in the Arab world, such as for example in the Levant area and stuff like that, or in Egypt or something, you'll find that the level of sort of conservatism changes. So if you go to certain places in Saudi Arabia, for example, to the Najd area, for example, you'll find that they're very, very conservative, because it's mainly the Bedouins who are living there. They have not had too many people come from different parts of the world. But if you go to, for example, Jeddah is a very cosmopolitan place. Dubai is obviously a very unique place, and we'll come to talk about that towards the end. And so the communities are different. But in other places in the world, you have a mixture. In for example, in Lebanon, you have so many different sects. You have even out of the Christian Arabs, there are so many different types of sects of Christian Arabs, although it's quite a small country. So the Arab Christians, for example, have some very, very similar traditions to some of the Muslims in certain communities. I mean, I have a friend, a colleague who works with us at work, and he's been working with us for the past year. And only the other day I was talking to his boss, and I said, we were talking about something, and then I said to him, well, I don't know. I mean, if he's a Muslim, whatever sect or something. We were talking about something that he could do, and then I said, it could be, or is he a Christian? He said, no, he's a Christian. I said, oh, okay, right. So you can't really immediately tell by dress or anything. We've become so kind of integrated also. Good to understand, obviously, the differences. So we to understand, how people behave, and so you don't get confused when working with people. And many things are become really so integrated, especially in terms of the food, and as I said, I've already mentioned, in terms of the clothing and in terms of the practices. And you'll find that they attend to each other's weddings and funerals and all kinds of things like that, which is about community bonding. So that was really a bit about religion and culture. Now moving just swiftly to talking about leadership and socioeconomic justice. I've already spoken about the zakat, talking about Ramadan, talking about working as a community. Because we have some business leaders here with us today, I just wanted to just share with you one of the things that we believe comes from sort of the teachings. We believe that Islam is supposed to help us to think positively about God, think positively about faith, understand that God has made us all equal, and that we should all work as collectively as a community. So I think even in terms of business leadership, I've been a director for several years now, and really working collectively as a team and as a community. And I believe that bonding and this whole idea of that we're all equal, at the end of the day, we all have a certain purpose to play within a community or within a team, is very important. The possible learnings for leaders, especially in these hard times that we're going through at the moment, I think is a lot of the empathy and the care. And I think that during this, especially this period of Ramadan, being empathetic and understanding what other people are going through, and what could be the consequence of an economic downturn as well, that might come because of this post-COVID issue. Well, I don't know. They were talking about the post-COVID world. I don't know if we're going to be a post-COVID. It's sort of a lot of people that I'm talking to today. I was talking to our chief medical officer, and he said to me, "Well, I don't think it's going to be post-COVID, my friend." He said, "I think we're just going to have to learn to live with it for a few years until medicines and vaccines are created." So it's interesting, this empathy and care. And one of the things that really breaks my heart is the fact that this whole thing about around social distancing. I think it's more about physical distancing, but we should not be socially distant. I think we are, as human beings, we like to live in a very community setting, and we need that to support each other in that. And in terms of leadership, I think one of the things that definitely, I'm sure many of you, maybe expatriates here in the UAE, would have seen from our leadership, from Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed and Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid, is that they played a very important role in saying, in being servant leaders and saying, well, look, don't worry, we're going to provide the food, we're going to provide the medical assistance, we're going to provide the medicines. Don't worry, just try to work with us. Let's work together to get through this together. And they've been spending a hell of a lot in trying to support everybody. They've been supporting. I think they've sent aid and supported about 48 different countries in the world, whilst they're going through the crisis like everyone else. But they probably saw that, alhamdulillah, we have not had the same number of fatalities because of COVID-19 like other countries in the world. We've been able to manage things, alhamdulillah, a lot better. But during that time, even instead of just looking at themselves and saying, they said, no, let's go and help other people who might need our support as well, which I think is really something which is fantastic. And a lot of it is, I think, based on the key basics of the tradition in being servant leaders and providing and believing that supporting others is really a duty, regardless of religion and color and creed and so on and so forth. Right. So let's talk now about Ramadan and the UAE and some of the business practices, and I'll give you some of my insights into this. So Ramadan is really an interesting time to do business. One of the main things that I found that people when I've been talking to them about Ramadan is that they see this as the working hours are shorter. Yeah, the working hours are shorter. I mean, they're shorter usually by around about 2 hours. Um, I find that there are certain people, including myself, who become actually more productive during Ramadan because you're not sitting having coffee breaks all the time and whatever, people having smoke breaks and so on and so forth. So, um, but you find that there is this stigma around a lot of people being very tired, not wanting to do things and stuff like that. The reason for that is because during the day they're working, but during the night they're out, and so people sometimes don't get enough sleep during Ramadan because they want to stay up all night, but they want to work during the day as well. So they don't get enough sleep. So it's usually a slower time of the year because of that, because people don't want to be making big decisions and whatever during the time. Usually you talk to them, they say, yeah, no problem, my friend. Look, after Eid, we'll sign this contract, or we'll do this MOU and so on and so forth. Um, so you find that you'll find that there's maybe somewhat limited hospitality during the day. So if you're wanting to do business and go and have meetings and stuff like that, you'd have shorter meetings because there's limited hospitality. I mean, most of you here have been in the UAE for just under 4 years, but you'd have probably noticed, especially if you dealt with the Arabs and dealt with the UAE nationals, you go to their offices and stuff like that, you'll find that they're usually quite hospitable people. They like to serve you, tea, coffee, and maybe some nice things to eat, etc. Take you out for lunch, etc. So there's limited hospitality during the day. So if you try and do business, what they would say is that, okay, fine, pass by the office and stuff like that, and then if you want to close a deal, usually they'll say, okay, well, let's leave it after Eid. So you might think, well, I should go and see him because we're not going to close the business. He's not going to be really in the mood, but the thing is, what you can do is there's plenty of hospitality at iftar and after iftar, and that's why, I mean, not during the COVID-19, obviously, times, but in other, you'd find that a lot of people would have invited you out for an iftar or an after iftar kind of thing, and then they say, let's meet, and then let's meet at night. So it's a bit of a nocturnal time for us, and especially in a place like Dubai, where there's there are plenty of places to sort of go out at night to sort of eat and drink and whatever, have shisha and etc. So, but the last 10 days, which we're in at the moment of Ramadan, are extremely special. They are. The reason for that is because we believe in the last 10 days, that's when originally the Quran was revealed on Laylatul Qadr, which is one of the eves of Ramadan, said to be in the odd nights of Ramadan. A lot of people say it's the 27th, the eve of the 27th day of Ramadan. But they're very special because that's when people really do a lot, spend a lot of time reading the Quran and praying and stuff like that. Some people actually take also time off leave. I usually take annual leave sometimes at the end of Ramadan because it's just we usually stay up very late. You get up in the morning and you're very, very tired, and it gets to you. So I wouldn't really, if you're going to do business in Ramadan, the last 10 days are really difficult days to sort of try to get some business done. A time for giving and visiting and connecting with others, and I'm going to talk about the COVID-19 as well in that. But really, the Arabs and the Muslims, especially the UAE nationals, they like, and you'd have seen that the government has been really trying very, very hard to tell us as nationals that, look, during this time, Ramadan is an important time, and you want to visit each other, but don't the big families. I mean, we've got big families, huh? Some of the tribes of some of my friends, if they get together for a Friday lunch, there's like 45 of them. These are like 2-3 families, that get together. So they're really, really concerned. I think the government is really, really concerned about Eid, and during Eid, with all this visitation happening, and they're really worried about the elders within the families, potentially contracting COVID-19 by accident. So what has been the impact of COVID-19 in Ramadan, and on obviously on what's happened with the community, is the physical distancing, creating that social distancing in a period where there is an increased visitations, and we're very, the Arabs, the nationals are very warm. They want to meet with each other. They want to sit with each other. You see, the way that we greet each other, by rubbing noses, by hugging, etc. And we're not able to do that. So the social distancing or the physical distancing has been a bit difficult for us. Time of giving, sharing, and hospitality as well. We love to be very hospitable. We love to, usually, I mean, this is the first year ever, right? That my house and that my neighbors' houses, usually we're sending different things that we've cooked to each other, so we can share during iftar, different types of foods, and stuff like that. And sadly, we've not been able to do that because of the concerns of the COVID-19. Communal prayers as well. I mean, during Ramadan, especially, there's in the evenings, there's a special type of prayer which takes place after the Isha, the last prayer of the day. Usually, for half an hour, 1 hour, where we have these things called the Taraweeh prayers, where we communally, sort of come together and pray. These are these are supplementary prayers, so you don't have to pray them, but most people do, because it's Ramadan, and it's a nice time, and a lot of people like to go and stand behind the imams who can read and recite very nice, sort of Quran and stuff like that. So it's a time when they go. So that's why your evening meetings, if you've had this experience, is starts after 10 o'clock at night, and people say, you want to meet after 10 o'clock at night? I say, yeah, because we have to break our fast, spend some time with the family, then we go for the evening prayers, and by the time we finish the evening prayers, I'll come down and meet you at 10 o'clock at night. Yeah. So you got to be ready to stay up if you want to have some nice kind of meetings during Ramadan in the evening. People eat after 11 o'clock and stay up until the early hours sometimes. So so obviously that's why the program, the government said, look, after 10 o'clock, they would like people to stay at home. Significant impact on hospitality and the F&B business. I think the F&B business, hospitality, and probably aviation have been the greatest to be hit during the COVID-19. There are other businesses which have actually flourished. I think the logistics business, for example, the food, well, the food takeaway business, but also supermarkets and the likes have done very well. Obviously, pharma has done very, very well. If you had a mask making company, then you'd be very wealthy right now. If you made respirators, if you made cleaning agents and whatever, and disinfectants. So there's been an impact on certain parts of the hospitality business. In the oil and gas, where I sort of come from, that it was quite bad for a couple of months, because there was a real decline in demand, but inshallah it's going to get a bit better. Impact on gift-related businesses as well. Some of you might be in the business of making corporate gifts and stuff like that. So that I'm sure those businesses didn't do very well this Ramadan. And during Ramadan, a lot of gifts are usually sent around from different businesses. They make all these kind of nice gift boxes, sending chocolates, sending stuff like that around. But there's been even in the offices. So that business probably didn't do too well as well. Impact on transport and other businesses that relate to them. So some of the transport businesses, the commercial transport was impacted. Even I think the Uber service and stuff like that would have been impacted. And sales are down. And actually, shops, I think, were told by the government that no discounts or special deals should be given at this time, where generally Ramadan, there's always these Ramadan deals and stuff like that, to try to entice people to go out more and shop more. So the sales are also down. So the impact of COVID-19 has been quite significant. In terms of doing business, I've got some pieces, a few pieces of advice. This is my last slide, but if you're going to continue to do business in the UAE, I think you'll find that UAE nationals really appreciate it. They like dealing with different nationalities. I mean, we have more than 190 nationalities in the UAE, working in the UAE. It's a small place. I mean, a country of about 8 to 9 million people, of which 80 to 85% of the population is expatriate. So know more about the culture, your client and the practices, and especially during times like Ramadan. Use the time really to work with more nationals, because you'll find that during Ramadan, I found, even with my colleagues and my UAE national brothers and sisters, they seem to be more receptive during Ramadan. And so it's a time where you can actually go and learn. They'd like, you ask them questions about the culture, about the religion, all that. They like to always talk about it. Prepare yourself really to understand the practices as well, because so you understand the practices, and it's always better. You do a better. Like Stephen Covey said, first take time to understand before you are understood. Right? Enjoy and enjoin in the activities. I think you will find them quite enjoyable. Inshallah, by next Ramadan, you'll be able to sort of get more involved in some of the stuff that we've spoken about tonight. And be open, and always ask. I think a lot of people, and this is my personal experience of dealing with a lot of expatriates, and they feel sometimes embarrassed about asking certain questions. I have very open conversations with my dear friend here, Professor Steyn, all the time, and he asks me questions, and be open, and as long as you ask the question in a very respectful way, I don't think that you'd get the right answer. And if a person can answer, then they'll answer. And as I said, remember, rejoice that we're one of the most diverse countries in the world, and sometimes, sadly enough, I don't think we as UAE nationals do enough with trying to engage more with the population of expatriates. Hopefully, this little talk tonight sort of gave you some insights and some interesting facts, and I'm very happy to take any questions from you. Sorry. Right. So this is the Q&A session now. Thank you very much. Back to you, Steyn.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you very much. Always very insightful, much learning, a lot of information. There's actually so much more that one can share. So thank you for packing as much as possible into the short time that we had together. There's a quick evaluation, a feedback form that we would like for you to just fill out for us, just to get some feedback overall on the webinar. And then also for those of you who want to, so the pop-up is there, just click on the tell us what you think, and it's downloadable. And then those of you who want to chat or ask us some questions in the chat box, thank you, Lauren, for your comments there. Really insightful. Thank you for that. We have gone slightly over time, but in the spirit of Ramadan and, learning from different cultures, being patient, learning from one another, like to invite you, if you managed to stay with us. I saw that we had full attendance throughout the evening. That's really great, and thank you for participating in the polls and everything. I have a question, Doc, which has come up. Why do some nationals prefer not to shake some women's hands? Doc, maybe you can respond to that.
Yes. Okay. So it's a very good question, and I think so. I'll answer this question in two ways. One, I'll tell you how to deal with this, and one, I'll tell you the possible reasons for it. Possible reasons are usually three. One, that some men, some Muslim men, they see that as being on the conservative side, that they should not touch another woman, because they see the woman as being something which, if they're not their direct family, like mother or sister or their wife or something like that, they should not be touching other women's hands. That's one thing. The second thing is, and sometimes I do this also, because when we go to pray, we have to do what we call like a wash, like it's called the wudu. So if we do a wudu, and we come to pray. Sunni Islam, for example, has four schools of jurisprudence. In one of the schools of jurisprudence, that if I've done my wudu and then I touch a woman, even just by shaking her hands, and this is a woman who I could potentially get married to, right? So someone, not so obviously not my sister or my mother or but even my wife, my own wife. If I touch her at that time, then I might have to, in one of the schools of jurisprudence, I have to go back and I have to repeat my wudu again. So some of them prefer to stay in that state of purity, and that's why they don't shake hands. And the third is probably because they just some of them are just very modest and very embarrassed, and they'd rather not sort of sort of touch. So it isn't in any way something that should be taken in a negative way. It's actually more out of respect for the woman, and how to deal with this. So what you should do is probably, as when you meet with a local national man, you should look at them and you should see if they sort of extend their hand out first. And then if they extend their hand out, then you can shake their hand if you don't have a problem doing that. If not, what they would usually do is that they would just do something like this, out of respect and to thank you and just to show you that they are greeting you, but without touching you. But please, take it in a very positive light. I hope that answers the question, Lauren.
Thank you, Doc. Anybody else that maybe have a question for us? I see you still online. If you have had a time to fill out the feedback form, that's always great. Right, Lawrence says, question asked. Just while you maybe thinking of one or two other questions, it might interest you that this engagement of Dr. Waddah and myself over the space of almost 2 years, we have actually also managed to come out of all these discussions. We've put together an article which has been published in Harvard Business Review here in the UAE. We'll gladly share that with you, which captivates a lot of the leadership values that we share. And we've put together a framework which is known as the Platform for Connected Leadership Framework, really talking about thinking differently about things, embracing other cultures, learning from one another, acting on that, and then also inspiring others to follow suit, just in terms of learning from one another. There's another question coming through from Tracy. Doc, is there a specific greeting during Ramadan? I would assume.
No, well, yeah, no, salam alaikum is a greeting, and salam alaikum means obviously peace be upon you, or the peace of God be upon you, like shalom, in Hebrew. But generally during Ramadan, we say two things. Ramadan Kareem is what people generally say. Between the nationals or between the Muslims, generally we say, taqabbalallah ta'atkum. Taqabbalallah ta'atkum is a bit more complicated. It's may Allah accept your good doings. Because during this month, people are just in worship and fasting and stuff like that. So we say, taqabbalallah ta'atkum. May Allah accept from you your good deeds and stuff. But generally Ramadan Kareem or Ramadan Mubarak is the same thing. So Mubarak in Arabic means blessed. So Ramadan Mubarak means blessed Ramadan. Ramadan Kareem means kind, actually in English. So Ramadan Kareem means a good Ramadan, basically.
Doctor, another question is, are there any gestures that are considered offensive to nationals?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you're sitting down in front of a national, you should never put your feet in their face by sitting up and then raising your feet and stuff like that. That is considered very offensive if you raise your feet. Generally, you will find that if you, for example, if you come into a national's office and you come to want to sit down, usually the person, so if I go into for example, a majlis with someone who's an elder, then I will not sit down until he has sat down, right, or she has sat down, right. So generally what you do is you let them sit down first, and then you sit down out of respect. It's a bit like, in the army, when you give a salute, you will not bring your hand down until your superior officer has sort of saluted you. Generally, so it would be considered, so what happens out of modesty, what generally happens is you go to a person's office, and generally if they're even more considered more senior, so you're going to go and see a client or something like that, and generally they'll tell you, no, please, you sit down. So I'm not saying that in that case don't sit down until they sit down. If they insist upon you, please sit down, that is actually them extending and being very sort of respectful for you by saying, no, you're my guest, so you sit down first, and stuff like that. So these are the kind of gestures. I mean, obviously there are other gestures which most other nationalities would be considered offensive, and it's probably pretty clear. But I think, Steyn, I remember we were having a discussion once, and you were sort of explaining to me how there's a gesture that the South Africans use, which actually the Arabs use to mean actually, please, hey, listen, just wait,
total
just
opposite.
be patient.
Yeah, total opposite in body language. Yeah.
which is so I found that quite interesting. So that gesture, which I don't want to do, I don't want to offend anyone. You probably know the gesture I'm talking about. That one, actually, if an Arab does that to you, please don't get angry. They just mean, just be patient. Just be relaxed.
Doc, we got another couple of questions coming in. Yeah, we got another couple of questions coming in. The one from Andrew, which is, are there differences between Sunni Muslims and Shia Muslims in how they observe Ramadan? That's the one. And then second one, kind of linking to the one on gestures, is in a meeting, if you are offered coffee or tea, or I guess maybe dates or anything, if you are offered that by your host, which I assume is a local or an Arab person, is it rude to refuse politely?
Okay, so let me answer the second question first, because it's less complicated. No, I mean, if someone offers you tea or coffee, it's always a gesture of accepting that from them, is because it's good to accept a present, yeah, because people are hospitable, and they feel, if you just say, no, I don't want anything, it they feel that, okay, maybe they're angry, or maybe they don't want something, or they don't accept so either you don't accept their hospitality, or you just sort of want to get to the point, and let's not waste time drinking coffee and tea together and stuff like that. So it's not offensive, but you're probably better off accepting it. If they offer you an Arabic coffee, in the Arabic coffee little coffee cup, generally you should sort of accept that, and so it's only a very small amount that they put in the coffee cup, and it's it's a welcome kind of drink, and then you can say, no, I don't want anything else, or just a glass of water or whatever, and that's fine. When you return the cup, as you might know, when you return the cup, if you return the cup directly back to the person who's poured it to you, they will keep on pouring, and they will not stop pouring until you finish drinking the coffee. So in order to stop them from pouring any more coffee, you need to give them the cup back, but you need to shake it to signify that, thank you very much, I've now had enough. So if you keep on giving back to them, they'll keep on filling the cup. That's probably what I'm telling you about tea and coffee. So you can, it's not rude to refuse politely. You might say, look, I'm okay, thank you very much. Maybe later or something like that, if you really don't have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. Right. The other question from Andrew: is there differences between how the Shia and the Sunnah Muslims observe Ramadan? No, they observe it the same thing. They fast during the same time. They see, if they sight the moon. Over the years, there might have been some, different countries who have started fasting at different times because they've sighted the moon at different times, or, But that's generally not between Shia and Sunni. Sometimes different Sunni countries, Sunni Muslims will fast, maybe 1 day difference between them. I'd say the only thing that the Shia Muslims don't do, and it's to do, the evening prayers I was telling you about, the prayers that happen after the Isha prayer, which is the last prayer. The Shia don't pray that supplementary prayer. Right? I must say it's a supplementary prayer in congregation. They still pray it, but they pray it separately. So everyone prays separately. And there's a reason for that. Is because during the time of the Prophet, they did not pray it in congregation. It was after the Prophet, it was actually the time of the second Orthodox Caliph that decided that, okay, he saw everyone there and everyone's praying on their own. He said, look, why don't you all guys pray together, and then you can bring in someone who can recite the Quran very nicely, and then everyone can pray together, and it'll be a nicer kind of communal thing to bring the community together. So they don't do that because they don't feel that is something that was practiced by the Prophet directly. So they don't wanna follow that. But they still pray the Taraweeh nevertheless on their own. And the other thing is that they usually break their fast a few minutes later because they take the interpretation of the Quran in terms of the breaking of the fast. So they usually, you'll find that sometimes if you go for an iftar and there's Shia Muslims with you, they'll wait for 2-3 minutes before they break their fast. But there's another reason for that. But that's the only real differences that we have to get. Many of them today, sort of pray even together, during the prayer time and stuff like that. Some of them decide they want to pray separately. So, but generally there's very little. The differences have been expounded as you probably know. I mean, the differences. I know a bit about Protestantism and Protestants and Catholics. And really, the differences between Protestant Christianity and Catholic Christianity is much more different than that between Shia and Sunni Islam. It's more differences in jurisprudence more than anything else. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So I hope that.
Thank you, Doc. Anybody else with a last question? If not, again, thanks, Doc. Very insightful. I think. Certainly a room for a lot more of these kind of webinars or information sessions. I mean, we do frequent companies as well. If there's anybody that'd like us to have more of a company discussion, with some of maybe your managers or people that deal cross-culturally, you're always welcome to let us know or request us to maybe assist in that regard. You're welcome to connect with us via email or our website, also on LinkedIn. And as I mentioned, Lauren, just on the article was actually co-authored between me and Dr. Waddah, talking about just different thought paradigms coming from different parts of the world, different cultural, religious backgrounds, finding commonality in leadership values. And I think in essence, really just learning from one another, just like we've exchanged some learning tonight, listening from Doc Waddah to give us some insights on Ramadan and some of the practices that we may be or may not be so familiar with. So more than happy to send that on to you to distribute to the members. It looks, by the things of it, if I look at the Q&A, that the questions have dried up. I don't blame you. It is kind of moving towards 10 o'clock. I know, Doc. You guys during Ramadan.
But I think.
Yeah,
there is one question here, Steyn. This is very interesting. Very interesting question about Mount Sinai.
Okay.
So from Andrew, he says that's been in my mind. Why is Mount Sinai a question that has been on my mind? Why is Mount Sinai important to both Christians and Muslims? Actually, it's not only important to Muslims and Christians, it's important to Jews, Muslims and Christians as well, because near Mount Sinai is obviously historically, if you go back to when the Jews left Egypt with Moses, peace be upon him, and they crossed, in the pass of the crossing of the Red Sea. And so it was in that location, and there's a location, there's a wadi, there's a veil of Wadi Tuwa in that location near Mount Sinai, which is considered a very it's a Wadi Muqaddasi Tuwa. So as I explained, that because Islam is a continuity really of Judaism and Christianity, to us, for example, Ashura is on the 9th and 10th day of Muharram. We generally fast the 9th and 10th, or the 10th and 11th. The 10th day of Ashura, there's obviously the martyrdom of Hussein at the same time, but actually the 10th of Muharram is the time when Moses crossed over the Red Sea with the sons of Israel, and so we consider that as a very blessed day. So we fast that day, but because the Jews also fast that day, the Prophet said, well, to also because we consider Moses as our prophet as well, we fast the 10th and the 11th, or the 9th and 10th of so Mount Sinai is an important location. It's close to the Wadi Tuwa, which is where actually Moses received the first communication from God. So that was the first time when he knew, when God bestowed upon him and told him that you are my prophet, and he gave him his staff. So the early start of his revelation. So I hope that answers the question. It's a long important thing, but there are many things, like for example the Dome of the Rock, or well, not the Dome of the Rock, but for example Jerusalem is very important to the three faiths. There's many things around the world which are important to the three faiths, and I hope, inshallah, that one day the three faiths will come together, because there is, we all worship that one God, so we might as well all worship him together. So Steyn, over to you.
Right.
So Andrew, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. Andrew says thank you. All right, great. Well, as I was saying just before we got that last question, we're kind of heading for 10 o'clock, and I know that for the doc and the others that are fasting and practicing our problem, you guys operate straight through the night. Those of us who maybe don't, I know it is starting to get a little bit late. Thank you once again. Great participation. Thank you for the questions, the interest, and yeah, just for the respectful way in which you have participated in this webinar. It's been a great honor for us, and really thank you to SAPCO, Lauren, Kathy, the team, and happy to do it again. Thank you so much. Nothing else from me, Doc. Thank you very much from our side, once again, for you leading this session. Have a good rest. Good evening.
I just want to thank someone very important. I just want to thank someone very important also behind the scenes. We have Marina also. Marina has been helping us sort out this whole webinar. So thank you, Marina, as well. Okay, thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed that and found that useful, and look forward to connecting with you again, inshallah, in the future. Thank you very much.